Hey everybody, welcome back to Eggs, the podcast. Today's special guest is speaker, best-selling author, and founder of the multi-million-dollar global consulting company Life Is Now, David Neagle. David, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thanks for having me, Ryan. Thanks for having me, Mike.
Absolutely.
Great to be here.
Yeah, thrilled to death to have you. Well, for people who maybe don't know where to begin with the David Neagle story, maybe we should talk about your early beginnings and sort of maybe the big pivotal moment that led you down the path that you're on today.
Yeah, the big pivotal moment was I was a high school dropout, lost everything, car repossessed, bankrupt, the whole thing. The only skill I had was to either drive a truck or drive a forklift, right? So I was working in a warehouse, manual labor. We had to leave our apartment building in the middle of the night because I went in good faith. I went to the owners of the building and I said, listen, I've had a financial hardship. I can't pay the rent. Would you let me out of the lease? And I thought they were going to. And he just looked at me across the desk and said, no way. And I was like, okay. So that led to me getting a truck in the middle of the night and booking it out of there by like 60 miles. And we had to live in a bad neighborhood for a couple of years. So I was working in this warehouse and everything was just getting worse. Now, my mind was focused on the idea. Somehow I came up with this idea that if I could just raise my income enough, I could go back to school, which would be a brick and mortar school, by the way, like there's no internet back then. And, but I didn't have the time and the money to do it. I was working 6.5 days a week. I had no extra money. We were on food stamps and I had no extra time. So my mind doesn't switch off of this problem. It stays on the problem. I need to find a way to make more money. For 2 years, I tried everything that I could. Nothing worked. Absolutely nothing. So I go into work one day, and this is after months of just being like completely beat down. Every time I go home, I'm almost in tears because I'm so humiliated by where we're living, you know, as a family. I get to work and I got written up and disciplined twice before I even started my shift that day. So I was just furious. I'm screaming at the boss, like they're the problem, right? That's where my mind was. Like they're the problem, literally screaming at this guy. So I go to work. I don't know how I didn't get fired, but I get in there and I'm working. Everything's going wrong. My partner at work didn't show up to help me work on the dock. Stuff's swollen over. My attitude is absolutely terrible. And about 2 a.m, it's freezing cold out too. 2 a.m, I'm pulling into this truck with a whole load of food that's stacked on a pallet. And the thing just tips over as I'm putting it down all over the place. And I just started crying. It was like, that was it. I just hit like rock bottom at that point. And I'm sitting there bawling my eyes out and I'm going, God, please show me something. I can't do this anymore. And I don't know what to do. Nothing's working. And on my kids, a voice said to me, David, change your attitude. That's all I heard. And it was audible, like I could hear it. And I'm looking around the trailer and it so pulled me out of what I was experiencing. I gained my composure. I went over there. I started stacking stuff up and I'm thinking about, what did I just hear? What does this mean? And I realized that I had been hearing this ever since I was a little kid because I was a terrible student in school. And the teachers would call my father in and they would say to him, David's a pretty bright guy. If he would just change his attitude about his work, he could be a good student. So I would go home and my father would yell at me and then say, go to your room. I'm taking all your privileges away until your next report card, weekends included. But nobody ever said, let me show you how to study. Let me see if there's a learning disability there, something. That never happened. So this was my whole childhood until my parents got divorced when I was 13. And then basically nobody was around. So it was just me and my brother kind of raising ourselves at that point. So I said, what is this attitude thing? The guy that I worked for that owned this company was the largest food importer in the United States. And his story was legendary in the company because he started it in his garage in a suburb of Chicago, built it up from nothing into, like the largest food importer in the United States. And I thought, what is the difference between his attitude and mine? And I recognized 3 things immediately. 1, he must have loved what he did because he stuck with it till he had this success. Number 2, he must have done a really great job at what he was doing. And number 3, one of the things that I noticed that stood out to me was that as this guy would walk through the warehouse, we had one of the very first in the 80s, we had one of the very first automated warehouses in the area, partially automated. It was like this whole new thing. So they were always walking CEOs through the building. They're all in their suits, right? And they're coming through the warehouse. Like 80% of the warehouse doesn't even speak English. But the owner would never walk past an employee without saying, "Hey, how you doing?" Patting him on the back. "How's the family? Anything I could do for you?" I don't care how many people he had with him. And for some reason, I used to notice this, and I recognized later, because I grew up in an environment where they hated the people that they worked for. They were always saying, "You're just a number. Nobody cares about you," all that kind of stuff. I recognized this person was different in some way. So I said, I'm going to change 3 things. I'm going to act like I love what I do. I'm going to do every job to the best of my ability. And I'm going to start treating people with total respect. Now, in my parents' defense, they did not raise me to be disrespectful. But because I had no skills in anything, as I was going down in life, I was taking it out on other people, unfortunately. But anyway, I said I was going to change those 3 things. And I said, I'm going to do it for a year and see if it makes any difference whatsoever. 30 days later, my income tripled because I made these changes. It tripled. It went from $20,000 a year to $62,000 a year. And it just blew my mind that this happened. And it put me on a road to study because I wanted to find out, how is this even possible? Because I was in no way in any position for no reason should my income go to 62. I didn't know nobody in my family even made 62,000 a year back then. And here I was, and make this quantum leap, and I can't figure out how the hell I do it. So I started studying. I mean, I don't want to get long-winded on it. I'll tell you as much as you want, but I started studying everything I could get my hands on. I turned my car. I got rid of the cassette tapes in my car, and I started getting tapes, books on tape, biographies on tape. I got Tony Robbins' Personal Power on tape. That's a really interesting story. And I had to drive 100 miles one way to work and 100 miles home. So this became my study period. And I did that for 7 years. And then I started my own business.
Wow. Yeah, your time on the road sounds like our friend Mike here. He's commuting between Sun Valley, Idaho and Chelan, Washington most nights or most weekends for weddings and things like that he works. And so,
how far is that?
It's a 12-hour drive.
Yeah, so, it's a bummer.
Yeah, I as you were saying that, I'm like, I had a very similar kind of switch from music to, hey, here's a podcast, here's an audiobook, here's something that's going to edify and help me learn, instead of just waste the time listening to the latest, greatest, whatever.
Yeah, right. Right, exactly.
Yeah. So based on your story there, and there's some more color around this story, being sucked through dams and all kinds of things, but to keep things sort of business focused for the moment, I want to talk about faith versus belief. I think a lot of people read these types of books, The Millions Within included, but also the classics, the Think and Grow Riches and these types of books. And I think one of the things that happens is there's a lot of well-intentioned information about mindset and belief and getting yourself right. And to be clear, I believe all these things are true. But I wondered if you wouldn't talk a little bit about just sort of the difference between faith and belief. And what I mean is that it seems to me that faith, for people, especially if they have maybe a religious tradition or something like that, faith could be something that you don't even think about, right? It's just implicitly true. It's built in. Right. There's no 2 ways about it. But to frame it in the realm of the millions within and the type of actions and activities that you talk about in your own life, setting your mind to something or believing that something is possible is really kind of the key to everything else. Like nothing else can happen without belief.
100%.
And so I wondered if you'd talk a little bit about belief just as being something active, something that we're proactively getting involved with versus just having a faith that things will be there for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to belief, we have to understand something. Just because we agree on something doesn't mean that I believe it. It means I have an intellectual understanding of it. I might believe in your belief. I might agree with your belief, but it doesn't mean that I actually believe it. Because when I was studying, I was also studying religions. Now, I was raised Catholic, but I was not all that impressed with the education that I got from the Catholic religion. But I would read in the Bible, and it would say, if you could believe, basically, you could do anything. Like it's mentioned so many times. And I thought, well, I've always believed something different, but that's not what's shown up in my life. What is the difference in the word? So I then started looking at books that were written, in the day in the 90s or whatever. And the way they used belief was more of an agreeable thing. Like, I believe this. You could tell me something that I have no experience with, and I could go, I believe that. Yeah, I believe that's true. Right? But that's not really a belief. A belief is when energetically you've got it in your thinking, your emotions, and in your physical actions. They're all in integrity with each other. And you're not fighting it every day, right? So I might say, I'm going to be successful. I have to get up and I have to make sales calls in the morning. And I get up and I'm thinking, oh man, I really don't want to make sales calls today. I just don't feel like it. If you've got a real belief, you're going to get up and you're going to do it. You're not going to have that battle in your mind. And that belief doesn't waver no matter how difficult it gets. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it makes sense. And I think it maybe leads me into kind of where I wanted to go with this, which is the stickiness component, right? I think it's easy to have belief. Like you say, it's easy to agree in something. And I'll just use my own anecdote. When I read Think and Grow Rich, I stuck a piece of paper on my wall with my mantra, that Napoleon told me I had to put together, that this was my income goal and this was my business goal. And I tried to, and I came into the office every morning and I read my little piece of paper, tried to commit that thing. Well, needless to say, I'm still not a multimillionaire. I'm still not doing the things that I should have been. All the things on that paper did not work out. And so to your point about having sort of this internal alignment, I think for me, I had written down this stuff and therefore I believed it.
Yeah.
But I think that there was still this component that maybe I was leaning too into the woo-woo and not enough into the, just because you're saying this out loud doesn't mean that you're actually doing anything.
Well, I don't think that it's a person's leaning too into the woo-woo. I don't think they understand how the woo-woo works. So the idea is that if you believe something, if you set an intention, the universe is going to respond to that all the time. Your then participation is to recognize that response and then take action on it immediately. And it goes back and forth like that to the achievement of whatever goal that you want. The faith part is interesting because there's a really great book on faith. It's called God Works Through Faith by Robert Russell. If you don't have it, you should get it and read it. I really think you'd like it. But they use Christian principles in that book to point out, number one, God's already created everything. It's already done. It's already here. That's a promise to God, to human beings. Number two, you have to act with that belief, with faith that whatever it is you're going to do is going to show up. Like I'll give you, for instance, with money, because I work with people on this all the time. All the money is already here, right? But most people say, I can't do things because I can't afford them. So they have the process reversed. The idea is when you make the decision, the money will show up. There's no reason for extra money if you're not making the decision. But most people won't do that. They're like, well, that's irresponsible. How am I can't just spend money like that. If you're willing to follow through on it, you absolutely can, because the money will always be there. The problem is where a person stops in their own belief system. If they stop short, it's Napoleon Hill's 3 feet from gold. If they stop short, they're so close, but they don't know it because they don't have the experience, and then they don't get it. That was the huge awareness, the aha that I had when I tripled my income. I could not see something that was around me for 2 years because my attitude was so bad. And when I changed my attitude and I started running it like a machine every day, it changed my perception. And when my perception changed, I saw the opportunity that was right there with me every week. And I said yes to it, and my income tripled. And I was like, you gotta be freaking kidding me.
I was raised in like a religious household, and I'm not necessarily that religious anymore, but there was a quote I remember. I don't know if it's a scripture or a verse, but it's faith without works is dead.
Yeah.
And that to me is like, if you have the faith that you're going to succeed or get what you want or do whatever, if you don't go and actually apply the steps that it takes to get to where you want to be, you might as well just be a pipe dream.
Correct.
Yeah. So as you've been talking, that verse has been in my head the whole time. And it makes so much sense when you think about it. You can wish all you want, but if you don't get up and actually do the steps that it takes, do those sales calls, meet with the right people, do whatever you need to do, you're just going to stay in place and not making any forward momentum.
That's right. 100%. And there's something interesting about that also. There is a big dilemma when it comes to in what way were you raised around work, around money, even religion to a great extent. If you were raised hearing things like you don't need that, money doesn't grow on trees, you can't do anything that you want in life, your foundational belief system is at that level. It's not at what you want. So it has to be raised to what it is that you want, which means you have to push yourself past what's comfortable in order for that to happen. But at the level that you're at, you'll always get what you need when you need it. You won't always get what you want, but you'll always get what you need when you need it. So the idea is that if I know I want to become a millionaire, I have to answer the mathematical question first. How does the math add up? Like if you have a business, what am I going to sell? How much do I need to sell? And how can I do it so that it's easy? I do not believe God wants us to struggle in any way or sacrifice in any way other than things of a lower nature to become something of a higher nature in our life. God, like Christ said, my yoke is easy, my burden is light, right? Christ came, like if you believe in that, Christ came to forgive people, not to keep their life being a burden, but to actually make it easy. So we are raised with the idea, with the ethic, if you will, hard work is what you base your value on. I'm the hardest worker in the room. Now, when my income tripled, I went to work for another company and I climbed to the top of that company when nobody in the history of that company outside of the family that owned it had done that. And I did it by working harder than everybody else. When I started my business, working harder than everybody else almost crushed me because I did not understand how to make it easy. Once I understood that, my income went from, when I started the business, I was making for about the first 3-4 months, about the equivalent of $50,000 a year in sales. And then I was working with my mentor and he said, David, it's easier. You're really making this difficult. This is easier. And I'm like, how am I making this difficult? But he was pushing me to figure this out on my own. So after 2 months of trying and totally failing, I went, okay, if he's right, if it's easier, what would be the easiest way for me to do this? And I thought, well, it would be one client at 50,000, but I didn't think that I could do that at the time. So I said, what if I raise my price to 15,000? Bam, like that. I hit the 50,000 in 2 weeks and I wasn't on the phone 20 hours a day trying to sell people for peanuts and stuff. And then it was like, okay, I got it, right? I understand how to do this. And then took it over $1 million and beyond after that. It's the higher you go, the more you make, the easier it is. And you have to break past the idea because here's this part, I left this part out. When you're raised with the idea that hard work is the ethic that you have to have. Now, I think you need to work diligently. There's no question there. But it's not the hard part that gets the win, okay? It's the math that gets the win and the consistency that gets the win. But here's what I didn't realize. Because my mind was so indoctrinated into the idea of hard work, when I would strategize out what I was doing, unconsciously, I was creating it to be hard because my mind heard all my life, you got to work hard, you got to work hard, you got to work hard. So I never thought about saying to myself, what's the simplest way to $1 million, right? What's the easiest way to actually do this? So it was like, create this system and make 10,000 phone calls and do this. And, and we make it so damn complicated that it's a wonder anybody ever gets there. But when I broke through that, everything changed.
Well, it's a great point, and there's a few things to unpack around this, getting back to this notion of stickiness. And what I mean is that for me, and using my example of Napoleon Hill and my stupid piece of paper on the wall, I tried a version of this with your book, which was, there were a couple little moments in there, key things that like your mentor had given you, like, hey, what if you could make in a month what you make in a year? Things like that, right? So I tried to realign my sort of personal income goals and stuff around some of those frameworks just as a way to think about things, right? So as a way to progress. But for me, and maybe, I'm not particularly religious either, but I have little moments in my life where I go, okay, well, there's something magical about that, whether it's, faith or a deity, or just this is the nature of the universe. I've uncovered some of these things as we go. And so for me, a big part of buying into the underlying message in The Millions Within and in other books like that, I think what I had to rely on was evidence. And so I took a little minute and kind of tried to reflect on what I had done over the course of my career, and how every time there was, to your point about, having what you need, even if it's not what you want and stuff like that. Like, I mean, there's little moments, and I always use this anecdote about, putting out into the universe. I run a marketing agency or a design shop. And so every time I needed work, I just kind of put out into the universe is how I describe it, that I needed more work, and then work came along. Right. And this year it hasn't worked. And so this year has been a really hard year for me. And because the systems, even though hope isn't much of a system, the things that have always worked for me in the past weren't working that well. And so I have this business coach. I went out to London this year and went to this conference with him. His name's Michael Janda. And as part of that conference, we came back, and he's the one who introduced me to your book just at the end of October 30th this year. And one of the things that I did in doing this little inventory was that, as bad as things were this year, I spent 2 weeks in Spain. I went to London for a conference. I decided to do all the stuff with no money. Like, how was there money to spend a week in London? How was there money to do this stuff?
Right.
But nonetheless, it happened, right? So I started taking this little inventory, and it really helped me jump the hurdles where I might have otherwise been cynical on the belief front. So, but now here I am. And like I say, I mean, I got really excited about these ideas, right? So I took the learnings of the book, and basically I broke it into an essay, or a series of 5 essays, to help me just kind of make concrete these notions in my head, right? So it was like my way of doing that. I do a weekly newsletter. So each week for 5 weeks in November, I wrote an essay. And each one is sort of on different aspects of this, belief and reprogramming and, these different things. And it was really a notion to help me build that or make it concrete in my head. Then, that turned into a downloadable object that was supposed to be 20 pages that turned out to be 200 pages. That's now going to be a physical book and all this stuff. And so I'm seeing all this traction all of a sudden, right? Then this week, there's 2 days this week, this morning and yesterday, that I woke up feeling really uneasy about things and feeling like all of a sudden I'm not making the progress. And even though I'm getting more sales calls and I'm talking to more people in the realm where we're trying to take our business, I don't feel like I'm getting anywhere. And so what's starting to happen is, I think, the same thing that happened when I had my little piece of paper on the wall, which is now doubt is coming in and messing with me.
Yeah.
And so back to this notion of stickiness, I think what happens for some entrepreneurs, and maybe I'm just projecting, so maybe I should just say, at least to me, is my own brain or my own thought processes will start to get in my way, and they'll keep me from sticking to these things. So I can see, I can just laid out for you a month of evidence that just changing my mind worked pretty well. Like, I got a lot done in November, but now I'm like, well, I don't know. And now I'm starting to think business as usual. And I just had a call with my accountant, and there was sure a lot of negative talk in there. And, and like, I'm feeling myself starting to spin back out. Right. And so I wonder if you'd just talk a little bit about, like, even in your own case, you were obviously in a really difficult situation when you decided to make the change, and you had the, whatever it is, call it intuition about changing your attitude. But somehow you managed to take that and stick with it forever. And I don't want to make a generalization about you being from Chicago, but I know Chicagoans could be a little bit, aggressive or assertive, and they might get passionate about things or excited about things. And that is not my personality. I don't get jacked about much. And like, even when I'm enjoying myself, like, I'm not hitting these high highs that a lot of people do. And so I'm not hungry for the money, outside of to say that I'd like to not worry about the money. And I'm not, dying to win 100 new clients, because like, I just need enough to get by, And so, but that sort of dichotomy that's happening in my head, I think, is keeping me from getting to the level of stickiness to build the type of consistency you're talking about for like a long run. Yeah. So I wonder if you could talk about all that, if there's any way to parse all that nonsense into something.
There is. So I call that a sabotage strategy, and everybody has one. And the idea is to understand what yours is. So let me tell you how it works first. Your subconscious mind operates on pattern recognition. It knows every pattern to keep you exactly where you are right now. That's why I say you always get what you need when you need it, right? Now, here's the thing. You set a goal to go past that pattern. Your subconscious mind doesn't know that that's safe. Not for any person. If you're setting a goal that you've never accomplished before, you have to go into the unknown as a human being. Your subconscious mind senses the deviation between where you are and that goal that you say that you want, and it goes, wait, hold it. That's dangerous. We don't have a pattern for that. I've got to figure out a way to stop Brian. So then it starts running a pattern. And what it's looking for is to create some kind of a distraction in your life that you will agree with in order to stop. As soon as it finds it, if you don't know that you're running a pattern, you will go along with whatever it notices, right? It could be what the accountants are saying, a bumble here or there, something's not working, and you get focused on the wrong thing. And then you say to yourself, I don't have time to go after that goal right now. I got to pay the bills. Now, I don't have time to do this other thing. It could be in your family. It could be in your personal health. It could be in your team. It could be absolutely anywhere. But the key is, remember this always. In order for it to work, it has to get you to agree with it. That's the sneaky part. That's the insidious part about your subconscious mind. Because when you agree with it, you're under the false premise that you're actually thinking, and you're not. You're triggered. And then that's where a person will stop right there.
Well, I think that makes a lot of sense. And the way that I described it, so we had Bob Berg on the show not too long ago, and he, is famous for his go-giver movement and all that stuff. Yeah. But one of the things I talked to him about was, that I have this feeling in my life that I've run into like an invisible barrier, right? Like I've hit a peak or whatever, and I can't get through it. Like I can't see the other side, or like I can understand that, there's something in the way that's keeping me from moving, right? And he described it as the lid, I guess, is a psychological concept, this notion of the lid. But so as it pertains to stickiness and all this stuff, I think what you've described is exactly that, right? So now we've seen the side that I think a lot of us live, but now what's the solution? Like, how do we work through that? And I've always attributed this to fear or lack of, like you almost need somebody to hold your hand and walk you through it. Because once you've done it, then you're prepared to teach others. But until then, how do you get through that?
So the idea is that you have to ask yourself two questions whenever you're going to do a new goal. First one, am I able to do it? If you don't think you're able to do it, you'll sabotage yourself before you even get out of the gate. So you have to answer yes to that, okay? The second question is, am I willing? Am I willing? But am I willing what? Well, we don't know, because we don't know what it's going to take for you to get to your goal. But you have to say, yes, I'm willing. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to get to the goal. Now, the idea is that once you start in that direction, the thing that you have to be looking for is, what is the next step? And then you have to take that next step in faith. So my question to you, Ryan, would be, where do you stop? What is the thing that gets your attention that causes you to stop and not move forward?
I think for me, it ends up coming back to financial matters. And it's, I'm a pretty creative guy. I'm a little bit spastic in that I sort of chase down everything. And Mike and I have traced down a number of these things together. In fact, this podcast started out as one of them 9 years ago. Okay. And, so I tend to jump onto the new thing pretty quick, right? So it's a little bit of that shiny object syndrome. And so as I think about my career and things like that, like I'm usually good for about 3 years someplace. And then in almost every job I've ever had, I go 3 years and then I'm on to the next thing. And so although it almost every time comes from a layoff, and then I go back to work somewhere else.
So it's a forced situation.
Yeah. Well, that's what it feels like anyway. And like I say, I mean, it's not financial to the point of greed. It's financial to, I just want to be creative every day and not even worry about it. You know what I mean? And and I know a lot of people have the objective of, hey, I want to make $1 million so that I can just, whatever, life would be so much easier like that. But like for me, it's not even really about that. I want to be able to do more for more people. And money would facilitate that. Me getting out from under some of the problems in our life in terms of finances and things like that would be great. Okay. In the past, I've always been able to sort of, I guess, quote unquote, manifest this money by wishing new work into existence. And after I took a year out of my business last year, it just isn't working out that way. There's all these kinds of things, but so they're all stacking right now. But right now, money seems like the answer, even though it may not be money.
Yeah, it's rarely the answer because it's rarely the problem. Mm-hmm. When you think you have a money problem, you're looking in the wrong direction. Money's an effect. It's not a problem. It's not a cause. Something else is causing it. So the number one question you need to ask yourself, and I think that you need to seriously answer this question, and it's not a right now answer this question. It's think about it. What do you really want? And you have to determine what you want without any kind of justification behind it. You can want it because you want it, no matter what it is. Now, we're not taught that. So it's a big thing to break through it. When my mentor said to me, when he told me this, he said, you may have to think about this for a year to figure this out. Everything in our life is programmed based on what we need, right? We're problem first thinkers. We're trying to deal with the issues that are going on in our life. And all of that's bullshit because it's not taking you where you want to go. As long as your subconscious keeps focusing on problems that you can fix, you're not charting the course for your own life.
Yeah. Well, and that notion of what you really want is actually, it's something that I had written down here, which is, so to broaden this out a little bit out of just my own personal experience, I think there's a lot of people who get caught up living somebody else's dream.
Totally.
And some of this is, maybe it's that inner voice, and you're chasing after whatever it was your mom and dad didn't get, or you saw something on Instagram.
Them.
Yeah.
They want people to like them. That's the thing that corrupts most people, that they don't have success. They're not answering their own heart. What do I want? This is my life, right?
Yeah.
I'm an adult. I should be able to go towards the life that I want, not considering whether somebody's going to like me or agree with me. That is a death trap for everybody, right? Because if you were to ask me, what's the number one problem that I've seen in 26 years of coaching people? It's that where people back out of their own dream. It's that somebody in their family disagreed with what they were doing and gave them hell. And then they couldn't get the person to change, so they quit. Instead of walking away from the person, they quit on their dream. Number one reason.
Yeah, no, and I totally believe that. And I wonder, if, just as we're talking about this topic in particular, and we can pivot here shortly, but the idea of, I guess, uncovering what it is that you actually want. Like, this is, of course, a big question with probably an even bigger answer, but how can we strip away a lot of these things, right? Because I mean, there's a lot of people that might just, and this maybe goes back to my comment about the Chicagoans. No offense to the Chicagoans, but for some people, I feel like passion or the thing they're chasing is more obvious, right? So for somebody, maybe their thing is, all I want to do is give back, or like, if you listen to like Tony Robbins' origin stories or whatever, his whole thing was just, I didn't eat, so I want to feed everyone, these kinds of things.
Right.
So the passion sort of reveals itself, right? And then it doesn't feel like work because you're doing the thing you love. So for a lot of people who are caught up doing whatever it is they're doing, I don't know that they have this clarity around their thing. They're busy playing whack-a-mole, or they're chasing the problem of the day or whatever it is. And they're not thinking in this sort of, I guess, grander scheme of things. Right. So I wonder if you'd talk about that. And I mean, I don't expect it to be an easy answer, but I wonder if you had some thoughts.
It's actually a simple answer. Easy is different, but it is a simple answer. So what you're asking here was the spiritual question of my life since I was a child. So I was born in 1966. So I saw, even though I was little, my father was in Vietnam. I saw and heard the talkings of the assassination of Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy Jr. and Malcolm X, and like all this stuff, and then all the craziness that was going on that was on the news or whatever. And I'm starting to go through the catechism classes as a Catholic, and they're telling you God loves you, God loves all of his children, all that kind of stuff. And I would say, then why are there so many people that are such a mess? And I would get railed for this, right? I'd get whacked from the nuns or punished from the priest or whatever. They did not like this question. And nobody ever, in all the years that I asked the question, gave me an answer other than there's some things God just doesn't want us to know. And I thought, that's bullshit. I do not believe that for a second. And here's what I used, because was born and raised in Chicago, but in the summertime, we used to go fishing and hunting up in Wisconsin. We spent a lot of time out in nature. I love being out in nature. And I used to sit and just ponder life, like I'm sure many people have. And I would say, something, the animals don't wonder what they're supposed to do. They know instinctively what they're supposed to do. They don't fight with who they are every day. They get up, they do whatever a squirrel does. You don't ever see a squirrel sitting in the yard going, I'm worried I'm not going to have enough nuts for the winter. And then a psychiatrist squirrel comes over and gives them some Xanax to calm them down. You don't ever see this. And I thought, wait a minute, if God created nature that way, why would God create us in a way where we have no direction in our life? And then that thought led to the next thought was, well, maybe God did create us to have direction in our life, but we're not taught how to find it and follow it. So I pursued that question for years. And I found the answer. And the answer is that God did give us a purpose and a direction for our life. But almost everything that we've learned as kids is taught to ignore it because it comes from the desire of what you really want. So we're not allowed to have what we really want. We're focused on survival and what we need and taking care of our family and being responsible and doing what other people tell us, which is a whole nother thing that I could talk to you about. However, so I figured out a way to get people to break through this, adults. And the idea is, if you don't really know what you want, start with this. Identify the things in your life that you know that you want. I don't care how small they are. It could be a new wallet, but you're telling yourself no. And it doesn't matter what the reason is. It's not the right time. I don't have the money. I'll buy it for Christmas. And start saying yes to it. Because all this is a subconscious pattern. If you break the subconscious pattern, that desire, that God desire, that spirit desire, that universe desire will come up from the inside, and you will become face to face with it. That is exactly how I figured out what I wanted to do. But the thing is that it has to be okay for your subconscious mind to show you what it is. Otherwise, a person will shut down right around it. So every person that I give this to, if they do what I'm saying, identify what you want now that you're telling yourself no about. And then you do two things. Number one, you start saying yes to those things, but then you have to take it one more step. The things that you know that you don't like and that you don't want to do in your life, you have to say no to. And that's another problem. People say yes to shit all the time and they don't want to do it. It's like you're wasting your life doing those things. And it's usually because they want to make somebody else happy. They're not taking authority back for their own life. Say no to what you don't want and yes to what you do want. And if you do that, I would think within a month or two, you'd probably have a real big epiphany about your own life.
Well, I think that's great. And I think one of the things that you use as evidence in the book anyway for this notion is the idea that if somebody called you and said, hey, I've kidnapped your kid, and you didn't have the special set of skills, and they said, you got to come up with, some ransom cash or whatever, like what would you do to make it happen? Right. And I think most people, whether it's, I need a new car, I need a new apartment, I need a new whatever it is in your life, I think most people would figure it out. Now I would caveat that, or maybe ask you about, which is, there's a way to get it done. And then there's like maybe it's not a super responsible way of getting it done, which is, hey, I want that new Porsche. I don't really have any money, but I could get the loan. So I'll just go get the loan and then I can't pay for it. So it's like, there's an irresponsible way to get into the thing you want, to like scratch it off the want list.
It's only irresponsible if you don't intend to pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first thing that most people do. They start going, I really want a Porsche. But I shouldn't want that first. I should build the business first. No, you shouldn't. That's the way. See, people don't understand how God works. God is working through you to lead you to something. If you constantly say no to it, you can't get to it. Right? Yeah. So I wouldn't say this to a group of high school students without teaching them the opposite, the flip side. Like, here's what it is that you actually have to do. But you have to think to yourself, responsible means my ability to respond. It is not a judgment for what you do or what somebody else thinks you should do first or second. If you want that car, go get the car and then go work to pay that car off, because that car is going to open up something in you that you haven't met inside yourself yet. You just don't know it because you haven't gotten the car. In all of nature, all nature is attracted to itself. It's attracted to the thing that it's supposed to be with. And you're going to tell me with human beings it's supposed to be the opposite? We're not supposed to be attracted. We're supposed to be rigid and do a bunch of shit we don't like our whole life.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense.
It doesn't make sense. Even Robbins said success leaves clues, but don't necessarily look at people for a great example of it. Look at nature and say, does this make sense in nature? I do it all the time. Because it's like, if it's true there, and life flourishes amazingly in nature, unless we interrupt it, right? It really does what it does on its own just perfectly. But human beings, they can't get out of their own way. And it's because we've got a subset of rules. A lot of it was indoctrinated in the Industrial Revolution because they wanted to create people to do what they're told. Yeah, 9 to 5. You got it. Exactly. And then that's been going on for several generations now. People don't know anything any different.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
So you've mentioned Robbins a few times, and I'm not going to name drop or say what I do, but I have the opportunity to work with him coming up here in a little bit. I've never read his books. I've never read your books. Apologies, I'm going to. Can you maybe talk about your relationship with him and how he's affected your life? Because I'm going to have some.
100%. So this is an interesting story. I had no idea who Tony Robbins was, but this is way back in the early 90s. I come home from work and my wife would make me some food. I'd get it out of the refrigerator, put it in the microwave, and I'd sit down and turn the television on, right? So this is like 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning. One day I turn the TV on and there's young Tony with Fran Tarkenton hawking his personal power tapes, right? The first infomercial. And the first night I sat there and I'm like, oh my God, this guy's talking about everything that I'm thinking about. But because we had gone bankrupt, we made this agreement with each other that we wouldn't charge anything. So I'm like, forget that. And I shut it off. Went to bed, didn't even think about it the next day. Come home the next night, same thing. And I'm like, it's only $167. I think that's what the price was. I'm going to do this. So I get up, right? This is when the phone's hanging on the kitchen wall, right? No cell phone. So I go in the kitchen, dial the number, the operator answers, and I freaked out and hung up the phone. I couldn't buy it. I was too scared. Third night, I managed to pull the trigger and I bought it. And I started listening to his thing. And he wasn't answering the spiritual question for me because he didn't talk about that at all back then. But he was answering a lot of other questions. And I was also hearing him talk about books that he read. So that got me reading some of the right books because I didn't even know what direction to go with that. But I got an opportunity in 1993 to go to one of his seminars in Dayton, Ohio. It was $3,600 to go. I had just fulfilled one of my goals. I bought a fishing boat and had paid it off. But I didn't have the $3,600 to go to this seminar. And I'm standing in my kitchen with my wife and I'm like, I really want to go. I feel like I need to go to this. I got to go. It was in February. This was December. And she said to me, well, if you come up with the money, you could go, but I don't know, we're going to get $3,600. Plus you got to travel. Plus you got to feed yourself. Like it's like $5,000 when you're done. Right. And I'm looking out my kitchen window and I see my boat there. And it dawns on me, if I can figure out what I'm doing, I could buy any boat that I want. Sold the boat that week. I went and bought my first computer. So I went to the Tony Robbins thing. I had $12,000. I bought a computer, started to learn how to use the computer. However, I started going to Tony Robbins stuff pretty regularly. And I got an opportunity to be on his behind the scenes team and all this stuff, which I really didn't participate in. But I got to know him a little bit. And then, I was looking for somebody to answer the spiritual question, which he wasn't answering. So I was kind of doing his stuff and I was also looking at a few other people. However, when I started the business, there was a guy at the 4th year that I was in business that embezzled $5 million from our company, left me broke, took my marketing list that I had built over 4 years, and I didn't know what to do. So I reached out to Tony and he told me exactly how to fix the problem, right? And I turned it around in a year. He told me how to renegotiate all my credit. He told me how to break through and get people that you could renegotiate credit with. And then he's like, and here's what he said that I thought was amazing. He said, you need to call every creditor that you owe money to, and you need to tell them what you're willing to pay. He said, just call them, so you had a financial hardship. You tell them what you're willing to pay, even if it's $5 a month. He said, but have enough money left over so you can take your wife out to eat. He said, you don't want to put yourself in a position where you hate what you're doing. He said, but you've already built this. Go out and do it again. You'll build it faster the second time. And I followed what he's told me to a T, turned everything around in 12 months. So that was the extent of my relationship with him. I worked with some people that were like Carolyn McCormick, who worked with him very closely in the latter years, but she passed away in 2014. But that's really what gave me my start in, thinking differently. And then my big mentor was Bob Proctor. Him and I worked together very closely for a period of about 7 years. And I think that the major change that I had came from Bob.
Yeah.
Procter and Gamble. That. Is that Bob?
Pardon me? Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right.
Okay. So just to kind of circle back and keep going on our little journey here. So we have, let's say we've locked in our thing that we want to chase down, that we actually want. And we have some, beliefs structure starting to show up and we're starting to feel good about what we're doing. We've decided to be disciplined enough to be sticky and actually be chasing these things and feeling what we want. But there's one thing that I've sort of noticed with, books like, and maybe I just missed it. Maybe I'm not the best reader of all time, but like in Napoleon Hill's book and things like this, there's a lot of, here's all the belief and here's all the things that you should do and here's all this stuff, and then we're rich. So there's this gap, or this thing that I call the gap, that sort of appears in a lot of these texts. And a lot of these guys, like, Napoleon Hill, he really didn't make his money until he started selling the idea of wealth to everybody. You know what I mean? So it wasn't like he came up through the ranks. So like in your case, your story, I think, is a little more compelling in that, even though I think a lot of the truths that he shared are similar to truths that you talk about in your book, and I will say, to your point about Tony Robbins, like, your book hit me at the moment that my brain was ready to hear those things, right? When I heard it from Napoleon and some of these other guys over the last several years, it just didn't do anything for me. But this time around, it was different, the way you phrased things or your experience or whatever. But when I started looking at some of those other authors, so many of them, even the Tony Robbins, like, they made their money telling people how to make their money. They didn't really come up through the ranks that somebody who's working kind of rank and file might. And so I wondered if you talk about it, and maybe,
how do you do that?
Well, I guess what I mean is that, so in your case, your story goes, hey, I'm, and maybe it's just because it's not all in the book, but it's, I was forklift operator, I was making 20 grand a year, then I tripled, and then now we're billing millions of dollars a month, right? But there's a big gap there, I think, just in instruction, terms of.
I went to the top. I went to the.
I understand.
I went to the top of the company.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So I understand that now, but I learned that in listening to podcasts, preparing for this, and listening to other interviews. I heard that stuff. That little bit of gap was missing. But when I look at guys like Napoleon Hill, and I think you pointed this out, which I thought was really good. So the point is that, even though Napoleon he wasn't an executive in some company, he wasn't like a Ray Dalio type. In his case, he interviewed the top 500 people and basically, parsed that advice into something actionable. And so the way that was done, I think, is really powerful. And so I wondered if, what I'm trying to get at here in this gap is for people who, get to a certain point, they buy into the belief, they buy into, hey, I'm willing to have a mantra or whatever, depending on which book you're reading. There's that gap between where the results start to show up. And I think we talked a little bit earlier about doubt, but I think some of that doubt is like trying to uncover if you're actually on the right path. And I wonder if you had some indicators or some markers for people as they're starting to move, in your case, and I think yours will be the case of a lot of people moving up through a company where you have sort of milestones, right? You hit a thing, but you could never have made millions as a forklift operator, instead you had to move up through this rank of things. And I don't know, maybe you loved the petroleum business and that was the way to go for you. But for a lot of people, if you're just rank and file and you're working retail somewhere and you've got grand aspirations of doing something, I guess, how do you know that the path you're on is meandering in the correct path, or if there's even a way to know?
I was just trusting. See, the thing that was most important to me was to find. So first off, let me start with this. When my income tripled, that opened a curiosity in me that I had never seen before. I wanted to know how that happened. I knew that it wasn't just luck, okay? Because I believed in God, and I believe that there's an order to the universe. I don't believe in luck whatsoever. So I'm like, how did this happen? So I'm following that path. I was working at the petroleum company because I found something that I can make enough money to treat my family well, to be able to raise my kids. And I worked very hard at it, right? Because I was like just changing as a person. So worked very hard at it, went to the top of the company, started there as a petroleum truck driver. When I left, I was in charge of expanding the company across the country. So that'll give you that ride, okay? But when I left, I didn't know what I was going to do. So I started waking up at 2:20 every morning with a voice in my head that said, David, if you want to live your dream, you have to leave. Now, prior to this, I was thinking about owning a hot dog stand, a pizza place, a corner drugstore, like a convenience store, 7-Eleven. Like, I was thinking about things that I thought that I could do. I wasn't thinking about what I really wanted, and I wasn't sure what I wanted. So I start having this experience. 6 months into it, I'm getting no further ahead. So I went to Proctor and I said to him, I don't know what the hell this is. I said, but it's saying if I want to live my dream, I have to leave. And he said to me, then just quit. I said, I can't just quit. I got 4 kids now. I got a house, a mortgage, the whole thing. I can't just quit. And that's what he said to me. You'll always get what you need when you need it. So I'm like, this path is so crazy. It's the craziest thing. Sometimes I think I'm losing my mind on this path because it's having me do things that just busted the logic of every way that I was raised. So I thought about it. I really thought about what he said. You always get what you need. At first, I totally disagreed with it. But then as I began to study my own life and other people, I realized he was 100% right. I'm like, how can that be? How can that actually be? So it got to the point where I said, I've got to know. I've got to know the answer to this. This was first and foremost, before making $1 million, before wanting to even make $1 million. I said, I'm going to quit. I'm going to do what he said. And the guy's never steered me wrong before. I'm going to quit and see what happens. Right? So I quit. I quit. Didn't tell anybody. The only person that knew was my wife. And I waited. And I waited for 30 days. Halfway into the waiting, I'm starting to get nervous. Nothing is showing up. Right? I'm talking about my life's purpose, my work. Like, what is it? We get a phone call from the woman that lives next door to us. And she says, she's talking to my wife on the phone. My kids just went to school. And my wife's going, yeah, sure. Yeah, you need to come over. Okay. So my wife says to me, she called and said she has this thing where she wakes up in the middle of the night and she gets a message for someone. She said her husband thinks she's crazy. And her husband said, don't you dare call the Neagles because we don't want to lose our friends. But he went to work and she said, I have to call you. She said, can I come over? She said, yes. Yeah. So I'm sitting there. We're sitting there. And I said, you didn't say anything to her, did you? She says, I didn't say anything to anybody. Nobody knows but you and me. She goes, sometimes I get a message from God for people in the middle of the night. She goes, now, if you want to think I'm crazy, but I have to tell you this. And then you do with it whatever you want. She said, God woke me up at 2:20 in the morning. 2:20 in the morning. Okay. The same time I was waking up and said, go tell David it's on its way. Hang in there. And I just started crying. I was sobbing at the table. I was like, I cannot believe this is happening. 2 weeks later, I got an invitation from my mentor, a generic invitation, not directly to me, to be a facilitator for his programs. And I didn't even answer the email. I was like, no, that's not it. And my wife saw it because we had a joint account, right? Back in the AOL days or whatever. And she looks at it and she goes, are you effing crazy? This is what you're supposed to do. And I'm like, there's no way that's what I'm supposed to do. I'm like, I couldn't go to that. Those people probably have a PhD in this and that or another. And she said, I don't think so. She goes, I think this is it. And then she said, look at the smile on your face. So that was it. I made the decision. I went, and everything was history after that.
Yeah,
and I love it more than anything I've ever done in my life.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it kind of makes the point that I was hoping to try and get at, which is that, at least in my mind, many of these books, there is this gap of how to, but I think what that points to is actually the notion of being receptive to things and being able to, I guess, recognize when it comes. We have the, don't look the gift horse in the mouth. And we have these kinds of idioms that people have said for as long as you can remember. But I think so many of us, hear the opportunity and then don't pursue it. Or like, for example, in my case right now, we're in the middle of trying to reposition our agency into an agency that focuses on a specific niche of clientele. And one of the doubts that's running through my head is, am I building an agency because I actually want to build an agency, or am I building an agency because it's what I've always done? And so that's why I asked about, did you love the petroleum business and you were just trying to grow through petroleum? You know what I mean?
Right.
But if that wasn't actually your calling and you later encountered your calling, how do people, I guess, understand when the opportunity is there to chase? Or are there mechanisms or things that we can develop that we can start to trust?
Where you are. So every person that I work with, we start right where they are. And I ask them this question, tell me what you really want. And if they can answer the question, we start there. If they can't answer the question, we start with the exercise that I gave you. Start saying yes to what you want and no to what you don't want. That will clear the path instantly. And the next step will be shown.
Yeah.
And that's for everybody, everywhere.
Yeah, no, I love that. So I guess kind of, the way that people start to take these beliefs and move into their sort of, I guess, future state. Like I mentioned to you earlier, like I spent a lot of time trying to look at the evidence and this trying to convince myself I'm doing things, the right way. So if you're faithful, not faithful, whatever it is that you think, for me, it made a lot of sense to look at my so-called evidence of being able to achieve things when I wanted to. Are there any other things like that you might mention? I mean, obviously there's so much of this story and so much of these types of stories that really do require you to kind of open yourself up. So I think maybe that comes naturally for people who are maybe raised in a religious tradition or have a particular affinity for a faith or something like that. Like they're used to being faithful. But for people who don't have that, outside of just being open and being receptive, I mean, are there telltale signs or the red flags that we're doing the wrong thing?
I don't know about, there could be red flags in a person's life, but what you're really referring to is the idea that they have to follow something that they can't see, smell, or touch, right? You could call it God, you call it spirit, you call it the universe, you call it energy. I don't care what you call it, but you have to follow it because that's the answer. It's not you. What you're asking is, how can a person have some kind of assurance? You cannot. You cannot. You have to be willing to move forward and make mistakes and then learn from the mistake and pick up and move forward again.
Yeah, no, actually, I think that's a great little insight. It's funny. I just felt a little explode moment. One of the things that, and sorry to make this so much about me. I'm a little, maybe I'm being a little too selfish here with this show, but, but I don't get the opportunity to talk to you very often. So, so for me, I feel like a lot of my life, to your point earlier in some of our earlier discussion, I've ended up doing the things that I think people think I should be doing. Right. Not doing the thing that I think is necessarily right for me. And actually what's right for me may not be all that different from what I'm doing. But the reason I'm doing what I'm doing is because I think it's what's expected of me, or it's what I've always done. It's, those kinds of things.
Right.
So I guess your point about, there isn't a flag, there isn't a path, there isn't anything. It's just, you just have to believe and keep doing the thing, is actually for me maybe a little bit of a relief, right? Because I spend a lot of time, and I think a lot of people who read books like these, are looking for somebody to solve the problem for them. Right. It's like, hey, what can I do? I'll just read Tony Robbins. He'll work it out for me, and it doesn't mean that there isn't good information and stuff in there, but we're almost trying to offload our agency to somebody else. Right.
Yeah.
And, whether that's a podcast you like or a book you read or whatever it is. And so I think just even hearing you say that and just understand that the answer about, is there a path, is that there is no path, or, that there is an answer or not, is, I think, I don't know, for me anyway, it's a pretty deep insight, right? Because it challenges the belief that was in my head, which is somebody out there will have the answer. I just have to keep asking.
Right. And the answer's been in you the whole time. That's what I found out. Now, you can have somebody guide you to it, right? But the answer's inside of you. That's the secret that's in the beginning of Think and Grow Rich that he talks about. I read it several times and I was looking for the secret. I couldn't find it. It dawned on me that he interviewed 500 of the world's most successful people. He found out what they had in common. He came up with the principles of success, right? But they didn't follow those principles. They followed their heart. Those were the principles that showed up when they decided that they were going to go on a successful journey. But because you see all those principles in all of success. Follow your heart. He says desire in the chapter on desire. Read that. That'll tell you how to do it.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm not sure we could put any better bow on this. Well, David, I really appreciate your time, man. Thanks so much for doing this for us. Any last minute parting shots? Where can people learn more about you, maybe engage with your content? I love the YouTube channel, things like this that you've been working on. Podcasts, great. Where can people find you if they just kind of want a single source of truth on David Neagle?
The Successful Mind Podcast. It's free. Go there, listen to it. If you want to know more, you'll tell you how to get a hold of us. If you don't want it, then just pass on and tell somebody else about it.
Yeah, I love that. And I'll just make a little recommendation. Everyone should check out The Millions Within. It's done a lot for me, and it hit me at the right time, right age, right set of thoughts and circumstances. So I couldn't be happier with the book. So thanks so much for putting it together.
You bet. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. And thanks so much to everybody who tunes into the show this week and every week. And we'll see you guys next time.